growing up, as a boy and a young man, I was pretty much your typical nerd. I loved video games, Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff. And the one thing I knew is that I wanted to be a computer programmer, because I had always loved computers. I wrote my first video game when I was 12 years old. So I ended up in college at MIT, which was a great fit, nerd capital of the world. And it was at MIT I discovered the internet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe there's this whole worldwide computer network that I had never heard of. And long story short, I made that my specialty. So I got my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree, and I was working on my PhD as a specialist in internet networking. And one of the really cool things we did was me and my two guys that I shared the office with in grad school, we sent the first ever live synchronized audio video stream over the web in 1994. So we were doing some really cool stuff. We were part of the World Wide Web Consortium. And, I am somewhat proud. I am one of the people that created the internet. And when the internet boom hit, I'm like, wow, this is my gold rush. And so I left MIT, moved to California, recruited my lifelong best friend, and started two internet companies, one to create websites and one to make video games. And it's kind of funny that the very first website I ever built in my life was the website for the launch of the Sony PlayStation in the summer of 1995. That was my first website beyond Brent's homepage. And the things went really well at first. A year later, I had 15 people working for me. But I used everything I'd learned and created at MIT to create this brand new kind of entertainment. And long story short, the strain of bootstrapping two startups caused me a massive health crisis. I had horrible pain. And long story short, little by little, I couldn't work like I used to. I went from 100 hours a week to 80 to 60 to 40 down to about 15, 20. I went to doctors and physical therapy. I had really devastating repetitive stress injuries. Now, there was more to it than that. I learned a lot later. I had chronic Lyme disease. I was suffering from chemical poisoning. I had an undiagnosed neurological disease. So I was kind of a train wreck. But I figured, I'll go to the doctors. They'll be able to fix me. But 3 years of climbing the food chain, I didn't get better. I just kept getting worse. And I'll never forget, it was in early 1998. I finally got accepted to have a consultation with the head doctor at the Curlin Joe Clinic, which was a big deal, considered one of the top orthopedists in the world. And I was there in physical therapy alongside professional athletes, Lakers, Dodgers, Olympians. So these were the best people. And I was so excited because I'm like, wow, this guy will know what to do, right? He'll be able to fix me. And so, I was so excited to meet him. And when I went into his office, and he's kind of sitting there looking at all my medical records, and he just kind of scratched his chin and looked at me and said, well, I'm sorry, son. There's nothing any doctor can do here. You're always going to be in pain and you'll never be able to work again. And I was stunned. I didn't expect that. And I'll never forget the last thing he said before I left his office. He said, son, you got somewhere you can go, somewhere you can be taken care of until you die? And I was 27 years old. And he recommended me for lifetime disability. And on my way out, his secretary said, oh, Mr. Phillips, please just know all your future appointments are canceled. We can't be spending our limited resources on impossible cases like you. And so the doctors gave up on me and sent me home to die when I was in my 20s. So I was depressed, even suicidal. I was in terrible pain. I could barely drive. And long story short, I went to my best friend and business partner, and we had been close like brothers since junior high. And I told him what was going on. And again, I was just dumbfounded by his reaction. I expected to be all, Brent, hang in there. We'll figure it out. Don't give up. I got your back, something like that, right? It had always been that before. And he just said, well, if you're never going to be able to work like you used to, you have no place here. So I got fired from my positions at the two companies that I had founded and that I had built up with my sacrifice and talent and ability. And he forged paperwork and pulled a bunch of legal games. And long story short, He sold the website company for millions of dollars behind my back. And I was left broke, living in my parents' extra room with soul crushing chronic pain, being told I had no chance of recovery. I'd never be able to work again or have any kind of life. And so I was depressed. I started day drinking. I was using drugs. And I was lucky I didn't get too far down the rabbit hole because a friend of mine turned me on to positive thinking. And he was like, Brent, when life's got you down and you don't know where to go, positive thinking is there for you, right? Now, of course, last 20 years, we call it the law of attraction. In the 90s, we called it positive thinking. Same stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go to your group and you jump around and shout out that you're going to be this big success. And I made a vision board and I said my mantras 108 times a day and, joined a mastermind group and all that stuff. So for about 6 months, I was like positive thinking gung-ho warrior. But nothing changed other than my credit card bill kept going up, right? I was racking up debt going to these stupid positive thinking. And so I'm like, this is garbage. I gave up on it. And then I had another friend turn me on to alternative medicine. And, he was kind of the hippie type. And he was like, hey, Brent, don't worry about those doctors. They don't know everything. There's a lot more you can do. So he turned me on to Chinese medicine and osteopathy and homeopathy and a lot of really cool stuff. And, long story short, for the next 5 years, I lived in my parents' extra room, running up a gigantic credit card debt, doing all this alternative medicine. And it was so frustrating because nothing helped. I didn't just not get better. I kept getting worse. I was in more pain. I had less ability. There were some days, I remember one day, and it was like someone had stabbed me in the arm with an ice pick. Just this pain that I dropped the phone and it broke. I mean, it was that kind of pain. It wasn't like, oh, gee, my wrist is stiff. It's like I could barely function. And I didn't know what to do. And after 5 years of failed treatments, and I'm like, what, $40,000 in debt at this point, I went to have an experimental surgery. And there was a doctor doing a trial, and I got accepted. And the only upside was it didn't cost me any experimental trial. But long story short, I had the surgery on my elbow. And when I woke up from the surgery, my right arm was paralyzed. Couldn't move my arm. And so my arm was frozen and immobile for over 5 months. And I'd been to physical therapy. They tried another surgery. I had a manipulation under anesthesia, all this kind of stuff. And my arm just wouldn't move. All until I went to see a woman. Her name was Terry. Terry, her story was she had been a really successful financial professional. She was Wharton School MBA, New York City career girl, super smart, talked 100 miles an hour. And she was almost killed by a black mold infestation. And the thing that saved her life was energy healing. And I remember getting the email, and I remember seeing that and go, wow, too bad. I figured another one's gone off the deep end of the new age pool, right? But my Aunt Lauren, Reiki healing and pranic healing and yoga and, acupuncture and homeopathy and all this stuff, right? None of it helps. And I don't want to spend any more money. And I don't have any, I'm so deep in debt, I can't do it. And she kept bugging me until about 5 months later, she gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. She's like, Brent, go see Terry. Not only will I pay for the session, I'll take you anywhere in the city you want to go for dinner. I was like, even Drago? And she's like, yes, Brent, even Drago. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I made an appointment and I went to see Terry. And it was so interesting because the work she did was all done with the mind. There's no hands-on, there's nothing you take, there's no machine or anything like that. And she introduced me to what we call muscle testing or applied kinesiology. Mm-hmm. And basically said, hey, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you questions and we're going to find subconscious blocks and we're going to clear them. And then we'll heal you at the end. I was like, sure, whatever, right? And so we had our session. Yeah.
This is not honestly, work.
Right. I was just there for the free dinner. I mean, that was my agenda, right? I'm like, are we done yet? I really want to go to Drago tomorrow. Are we done? And so anyhow, she asked me a lot of questions about my childhood, what had happened with my best friend, the loss of my career, the pain I'd been in. And to be fair, it was very interesting. But the whole time I'm going, hey, lady, I'm not here to talk about my feelings. I'm here because I'm in pain and I can't move my arm, right? And so she went through, we did, the muscle testing, and she did this block clearing process over and over. And at the end of our session, she's like, okay, we're going to heal your arm now. And I'm thinking, right, you and what army, right? Doctors gave up on me. I've had surgeries, physical therapy, all this stuff. Nothing can help here. And so, she kind of closed her eyes and went into a trance. And I'm looking out the window, thinking about what am I going to watch on TV when I get home? And it was maybe 30, 40 seconds later, there was this loud pop and snap in my elbow. And it kind of startled me. And I was like, whoa. And I remember Terry opened her eyes and she's like, okay, let's try your arm. And I did. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. It was a freaking miracle. I could move my arm again. I was so shocked that, I experienced a genuine life-changing miracle. And in that moment, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what just happened here, but I got to learn this. And so that became my new path. But before we go further, I just want to be really clear and honest with everyone listening. That what did happen that day was my arm, I had not been able to move for 5 months. None of the treatments helped. And after 1 hour with Terry, where there wasn't even any physical contact, there was this loud crack and I could move my arm again. It was like magic. And that never gave me a problem again. What did not happen that day was it wasn't like all my problems got solved in an hour. So I still had a chronic pain. I was still depressed. I had social anxiety, a lot of back pain, arthritis in my knee, trauma from all this and that and the other. But that miracle with my elbow, that was the validation I needed.